Welcome to Musings from Arledge Solo Edition. I have with me a special guest, and this one's going to be fun. Brandon Hancock. Anybody who was following USC during the Pete Carroll heyday knows who Brandon is. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's an honor to be here. Long time, obviously, fan of the website and obviously a fan of the football team. Every year you get removed, it's a little bit harder and harder to let go of those glory days, but it's really nice to see the team charging back into the limelight. Here we are, juiced up, looking we're ready to make a run to get into the dance this year, and it's really fun to see the level of excitement, the alumni resurgence, people coming back into the fray at the Coliseum this year to hopefully see our guys carry the sword to the promised land, baby, and spike it the way it should be. So thank you very much for bringing me on board today.
Absolutely. So, Brandon, for those who don't know, Brandon played fullback back in the day. And kids, if you just started watching football within the last 8 or 10 years, we should probably tell you what a fullback is. Brandon played fullback, and that means that obviously got some carries, caught some passes, but was also primarily a blocker for some of the best college football players that ever lived. Two different Heisman Trophy winners and USC's all-time touchdown leader. So that's a pretty good crew that you played with. Let's start actually talking about the old days because, and I know it sounds funny because you're still a young guy, but it's getting to be the old days now.
Yeah.
So first question, this is the question everybody wants me to ask. You ready?
Shoot.
All right. How is it that you managed to play fullback so successfully when you were so scrawny? I mean, didn't somebody pull you aside and tell you about protein powder or creatine or something?
You know what? It's an interesting question. You know what? Again, you want to talk to young kids out there. The position of fullback is a fossilized dinosaur these days. You don't see much of it. You got glimpses of it here and there with, Juszczyk and the Niners offense and some of those two-back systems, which you see now kind of a resurgence in the NFL with teams that are physically, they're dominant, right? It's about high-speed collisions. It's about wearing out your opponents, making them feel you in the fourth quarter, and buckling their knees when you need to. So knowing that was going to be part of the job description for a fullback, it's all about violent collision. And I was an early adopter, if you will, to getting in the weight room. That's probably no mystery to most of the folks out there. I can't say that I still look the same way I did back then, but trying to carry it as best I can. But, there's nothing wrong with, eating 2 cans of tuna fish at your high school break and smelling like dead fish, trying to kiss girls. Didn't go so well for me. But, hey, push comes to shove, you do it the right way. I mean, I had more mass than a Catholic church at one point, and I had to because I was banging heads with All-Americans on the other side of the ball to the likes of Troy Polamalu, Lofa Tatupu, Keith Rivers, Ray Maluga, Kenichi Udeze, Sean Cody. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all-pro, NFL, and future Hall of Fame guys. And if you didn't, bring the wood, you were going to get sent to the chop house real quick out there on the football field. That was a kind of Pete Carroll way. And being in the weight room, it was a kill or be killed mentality. And to rise to the top of the heap there, you had to be sure to be packing some extra muscle.
So I want to talk about what it was like playing on those teams because, as you mentioned, there's some excitement around the USC program. Really, for the first time in probably a decade, it got tough for a while, and so there's some excitement. There have been a number of other little mini dynasties since that Pete Carroll time. I mean, Urban Meyer had a pretty good run at a couple of different places. Obviously, Georgia right now. Alabama has had an incredible run, maybe one of the greatest of modern college football. Clemson had a nice run, but I maintain that there was something different about USC's run. Maybe not in terms of record and national championships, because there are other teams that have done that, but in terms of the excitement around that program. If like me, you went to all of those home games during that time period. You couldn't help but tell there was a buzz around the Coliseum. There's stars around. I went to a number of road games too, and when you go on the road, USC coming to town is like the Beatles coming to town in 1964, right? I mean, it was, and I think it was different than some of these other programs. Tell us what it was like.
Well, now you're dating yourself a little bit with the Beatles reference there, big guy.
I'm not
Think
that
you're
old,
born
but I am a
yet.
fan.
But we'll let that slide. But listen, it's no mystery that all starts with one impetus, and the lightning rod for the program was certainly Pete Carroll. And I'll dive into a little bit about my recruiting story and why I chose to renege from Stanford and come to USC. And it wasn't because 9 out of 10 women in California are gorgeous and the 10th one goes to Palo Alto. Okay. That had something to do with it, but it wasn't everything. Okay. When the Silver Fox Pete came into the program, remember, he was a consolation coach. And, a lot of people thought, oh my God, we're just going to get Hackett, version 1.1. It wasn't going to move the needle. But what's unique about that man was his energy, his vision, his captivating sense of how to tell stories. And, when he came and sat in your living room and you had an eye-to-eye conversation with him, he did his homework and he was able to instill a fire and an energy and an optimism and positivity that, I went all around the country. I met with, Lloyd Carr in Michigan. You could find a stronger pulse in the morgue. I said, you guys are out. I didn't like the fraudsters over there at UCLA, Toledo, total hack, soft, powder yellow, canary blue, whatever you want to call it, that combination of colors. They just they're not bleeding the same blood that I'm bleeding, alpha blood, right? And so Pete was a guy that not only, look, he developed his ideals and his paradigms and his processes to succeed across all phases of life, but he was a master at capturing, like you said, there was an energy. LA is a unique place. It's not a fly-by-night type of situation. If you want lasting power in this city, you have to be compelling. And if you look at, the Showtime Lakers and how that was rocking in a buzz and the fanfare, the intersection of Hollywood, television, music, culture, marketing, the weather, the whole nine, he brought elements of all of those different factors into play. So, if you happen to be a kid from Des Moines, Iowa, or somewhere in the middle of Ohio, and you come out on a recruiting trip, and next thing you know, you're looking at bottle service, and there's Hasselhoff eating a cheeseburger, and Britney Spears twirling around like a lunatic, and Dave Chappelle and Adam Sandler, and your head would totally spin. And so, although that's just it's an ancillary piece of the puzzle, but it has a lot of resonance with folks because they're like, this is the show. You want the biggest eyeballs and the brightest spotlight thrust upon you. Like Colin Cowherd says this all the time on air, and I think it's absolutely true. The SEC has had their run. You mentioned Alabama and Clemson, right? It's very regional football. When you look at the national championship game ratings for those contests, dismal, right? It's just a small pocket. When college football is at its height and the best is when you have bi-coastal powers, there's not much in the Northeast, obviously, but when Miami was on fire and they were hauling off first rounders left and right, and then it flipped over to us. I mean, that is kind of the greatest heydays in war of the sport. And it's just really unique because you got to think about the perfect timing of the way everything kind of went down playing at USC during those years. And you mentioned 2 Heisman Trophy winners. I actually played with 3. I got to catch a pass. Well, the very first series of Carson Palmer's senior year, I caught a little arrow route out in the flat against Auburn. I was 18 years old, sharting a sock full out of nervousness. And dude, it was something that changed my life, right? And then to block for Lindale and Reggie and catch balls from Leinart, amazing. But, the Lakers were trash at the time. They shipped Shaq out of town. Dodgers, Angels, non-starters. The Kings were down. There was no dominant presence in California or LA for that matter. And so we filled this massive void to where everybody used to be sitting on the sideline, courtside, at these games, the Jack Nicholsons of the world, Denzel Washington's, Will Smith's, Jerry Bruckheimer's, the rappers. It didn't matter. Once the buzz started rolling and that wind train started heading downhill, you started to see all these stars come out of the woodwork. And it just kind of became second nature to be rubbing shoulders with folks like that. And then on top of that, you got Reggie, who's kind of whispers are he's dating Kim Kardashian, and Leinart and Paris Hilton. So when you have a couple rings on your finger and you walk out into LA or Hollywood or wherever you want to go, and you're a young, 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, and you're skipping the red carpet to jump in front of the line with everybody, you got people taking paparazzis chasing you around. I mean, that's something that you're never going to have recreated in the landscape of college football. And I think just the timeliness of it, how fast we won, and then having those 3 Heisman winners stacked up, year here, skip a year. I mean, you never had that intense of a focus on one program at one point in time that kind of captured the nation's attention. So much so that, you know, people wanted to take us out, right? No one liked to see someone on top for too long. And there's a long line of bitter, you know, programs that were very, very jealous of that and how we were able to win recruits. Once Pete was able to establish that is the mainstay and just part of the fabric of who USC is. You know, we're here to perform. We are the showstoppers and the party starters, start to finish, and we're the show. That rubs people the wrong way. That's what made us really special.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting about that is that everybody around the country understood the flash and the speed and the points and all that stuff. But there was something that almost everybody missed until it was too late, right? Whether it's Iowa or Oklahoma, Auburn, I don't care who it is. All of those programs came in and they thought we're bigger, we're tougher, we're more physical. These guys are all flash. And pretty consistently, you guys would go out and just punch them right in the face. Where did that toughness come from in that program?
Great question. And there's a pretty short answer to that. I think a large component of the physicality, the controlled violence, the will to execute our dominance over you, that came from Ed Ogeron, man, straight up and down. You know, every team has its cast of characters. You know, Norm Chow at the time was kind of the prodigy who was the guy behind, you know, the curtains at Wizards of Oz, who's drawn up the plays, who's just an enigma, who was a genius, the evil genius. Then you had, you know, certain guys like Ed, and then there's, you know, Ken Norton, another guy who was ruled by the iron fist, hammer, accountability. You know, if you didn't do your job, watch out. You might have a desk thrown at your head while you're sleeping in a meeting room. You know, those are the type of tenets in people where you have an axe man, but just like in hockey. You know, you have Wayne Gretzky, who's the all-star out there who's scoring the goals, but then you have Marty McSorley, who, if you come mess with this guy, is going to break your knees in half. So the coaching, there's a level of that as well, right? You have your CEO and your leader being Pete, who, as much as his job was, you know, managing the X's and O's, it was even more so probably dealing with the alumni, fundraising, recruiting, bringing people into the fold. I mean, that's a sales job too. And he was so good at crafting and building out his coaching rosters, if you will, that, you know, everybody had a specialized role within that. You know, Lane Kiffin, who has gone on to become one of the best recruiters in college football. You know, he was a young kid right out of school, pencil neck, little geek looking kind of guy. Might have been a year older than our oldest senior. And he was able to gravitate with certain folks. So just that dynamic mix of personalities, you know, they all led to something really, really unique and great. But when it came to being the hammer and not the nail, and that level of whoever we are, doesn't matter if their X's are bigger than our O's, we have more fight, and we're going to punish you. That 100% came from guys like Ed Ogeron, as I mentioned. And, you know, after that, Ken Norton was another guy. Like, you know, these guys, Ken Norton played in, I think, 3 consecutive Super Bowls. His dad beat Muhammad Ali. I mean, this is a big man. And you feared, you know, there was fear back in the day, which I think in our common place that we live in now, you know, you can't put your hands on people. You know, we're not supposed to talk about that. But there was accountability to be had. There were hard lessons learned. If you talk back, you did the wrong thing. I mean, you were liable to get roughed up. And so, you know, it's one of the things we look at the dichotomy of UCLA and USC. You know, they're up there in Bel Air, and it's all, you know, pleasantries and you know, yuppie life. And you get down closer to the ghetto, you know, we got some bad dudes, and you know, you want to play like that. That whole mentality was definitely born out of Ed Ogeron's tutelage, and then from there, I mean, the alphas that rise to the cream of the crop within that locker room took the torch and just ran with it.
So let's talk about the way football may have changed over the years, and probably will continue to change, because that wasn't that long ago, but it was a time, and you're about 10 years younger than I am, and I didn't play at a high level. I played small college ball, but at that time, and certainly my dad's time, football was a game for tough guys, and it was and you know, you playing bull in the ring, you're doing the Oklahoma drill, you're talking about knocking people out, right? Blocking somebody when they don't see you coming, taking a receiver's head off. I mean, that's the way the game was played.
Yeah.
That was a fun way to play football. We've lost some of that, and I know that we had to, right? We just know more about the brain than we did before. But have we also lost something? Do you miss the old days?
I really do. I think a lot of our players do. You know, I've done a really proactive job at trying to stay in touch with a lot of the guys that I used to bang heads with on a regular basis, you know, and Saw Brian Cushing not too long ago, had a great NFL career. I played with some great linebackers, and these are guys that people really, really fear. Troy, no one more so than Troy Polamalu. And if you watch that guy's highlight reels, my God, I mean, he's like a Mike Tyson type of figure, soft spoken, whatever. But when he snaps, and you're going to lose that battle every time. We had a luxury back then because we were so deep on our roster. I mean, I'll tell you right now, everybody that was a backup to me when I was healthy all played in the NFL, right? That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Stanley Havili, Ryan Paldrell, David Kurtman, these guys all went on and played for NFL rosters. And our motto back then, because we had so much talent, we would go 11 on 11, full speed, ones on ones, every Tuesday, competition Tuesday. And is there an opportunity cost? Hell yeah, there is. You're going to lose some soldiers in those fights and battles, right? But because we could, the next man up would just literally pick up on that corpse, grab that bayonet, and keep on marching. It was iron sharpening iron. And so the whole philosophy that Pete instituted around that was, tell me which opponent you're going to face throughout the course of a season. If you're trying to dig out, a Troy Polamalu coming down as a free safety or a Lofa Tatupu on an ISO block, when you get to Saturday, this is patty cake stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's no one else that's going to be your competitor that's better than those guys. So by the time you got to the weekend, it was a slower game, it was a softer game, and it became simple. Now, I've gone back to practice, last couple of years, and now they got the bubble wrap on the helmets. They hardly ever wear pads. I do see that translate quite a bit. And not only on the offensive side, but defensively, even more so probably. I think everybody that's a Trojan fan here could look to that Tulane game last year, and they should not have been on the same field with us. And you really are alarmed by the open field tackling, how people are just arm tackling. They're not diving and wrapping up. I understand that you're going to get penalized for targeting now. I feel really bad for defensive players, to be honest with you. It's almost that they're at an extreme disadvantage. Even when they try to lead with the shoulder, your head's going to come down. It's made the game, it's a different game we play. And because of that nature, I'm not trying to be that old grandpa that walks uphill both ways in the snow, but dude, it was a tougher run that we had. Double days are eliminated. We used to do that all summer long. And we were padded practice, 3 days out of the week. And you see that translate with the blocking. Even just having no fullbacks now, but it's a quick release, RPO type of game, get the ball out quick, operate in space. And you don't see a lot of teams that are really just committed to just driving it down your throat over and over and over again until they break your will. And that only comes when you practice that way. So I do miss it. I do miss seeing that. I think a lot of people do. You can even go back to baseball, right? The steroid era, hell, that was a lot of fun, getting jacks and all that kind of stuff. But, I understand the asterisks there. And clearly, I might as well say these names while I'm here right now, but we have lost a couple of guys that played on my teams. Kevin Ellison was a dear friend of mine, and he was a hard-hitting safety, played for the San Diego Chargers. At one point, something snapped. And, he lit his apartment on fire, and he ended up taking his own life at one point. There were warning signs. We all know about Junior Seau. I happened to see him. I was doing the broadcast show for ESPN 710 radio. I was walking to go do my set, and he's over sitting there with a fedora on, playing a ukulele, just talking to nobody. And I was like, I never see him around. That's just so bizarre. Then, that following week, these tragedies happen. So listen, I understand that we have to, evolve with the times, and it's definitely not the same game it was with the Ronnie Lotts of the world and the McGinnis and some, the Jack Tatums and Dick Buckuses and all that kind of stuff. But, it's still a fun, exciting product to watch. And I think the teams that can manifest the best balance of both of those, approaches and attacks are going to be the ones that make it the distance.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of names. This is what I want to do. I want to go back and I want to ask you, I'm going to give you a name and I want you to tell me what made that guy special. I'm not going to do the obvious ones. I'm not going to ask you about Reggie. I'm not going to ask you about Troy. Everybody can tell those guys were what they were doing that made them great. Okay. But I'm going to ask you about a handful of other guys. I'm going to start with this one. Matt Grudigan.
Listen, it's so funny because one of my good friends is coaching for Modern Day right now. And my old teammate, Alex Holmes, who's, a total savant. He's a brilliant guy, played in the league for a bit. His little brother, Colette, is on that staff now too. And when we played Modern Day, I remember I grew up, I was a California redneck, dude, cow pies and pesticides, Fresno, California, baby, San Joaquin Supreme. And we didn't have much outside of dirt bikes and football, right? And when we got Mater Dei on our radar and had a chance to play those guys, you know, my freshman year, we went down to Brea. My team, the freshman team, beat them, but our varsity got thumped. The following year, they came back, and now I'm playing varsity as a sophomore. And Grudegood was an animal. Okay, he was their starting quarterback. I remember at some point during the game, he got a little nicked up, but he was, you know, he was wheeling and dealing, and he got knocked out of the game. Then Leinert came in to be his backup, and I was playing defensive end back in those days. I think I had 2.5 sacks, which kind of it really put me on the map on the national stage because I was, you know, underclassman, All-American, all that kind of stuff. But Grudegood almost got ejected for, you know, people that watch Monday Night Raw and WWE say it's fake and all that. He literally had a running back coming through the hole. He was playing linebacker, and the guy was kind of going down. And instead of like burying him into the ground, he leaned over, picked him up by his waist, and like belly to back suplexed the guy flat on his ass. And the guy was knocked out. I think his name was Ryan Ledger, or little tailback. And the refs didn't know what to do. They're like, do we keep this guy in here? He's going to kill somebody, right? So when it comes to Grudegood, I think of an absolute pound for pound warrior. I mean, the dude was one of the hardest hitters. When you hit his body, he was like a cave, like a hominid. Like he had thicker bone density. You know, his head was like a cinder block. He would pop the hell out of you. And one thing about him is low level, his low pad level, his legs. He would get underneath you, and I mean, he was probably 215 tops, and you could be coming downhill at him, and he just found a way to release his hips, and he was just someone you didn't want to see many times throughout the course of a game. Not the biggest, certainly not the fastest, but probably the smartest player we had on our defense. You know, the old adage goes like this: you know, you could run a 4-4 with a false step in the wrong direction, or run a 4-6 and know exactly where you're going, and you're going to get to the point of contact faster. That was Matt. You know, he like me, he had a big old schnoz on him, but he could literally smell the football better than anybody else did. That's what made him an effective player. I mean, he was one of the greatest college linebackers and defensive players I suited up against. And just because he didn't translate to the NFL because he was kind of a tweener, a little too small to be a linebacker, too slow to be a DB. But by God, one of the greatest athletes in high school football and college, I think, in the state of California history.
I know a lot of people have watched a lot of high school football in California and say he is the greatest high school football player they've ever seen. And I think he's vastly underrated by USC fans now because he didn't have that NFL career. All the names of these guys from the Pete Carroll era, and more I come back to, I never saw a better football player than that guy.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. And again, you know, it's hard to kind of lose sight of what happened in college and then what did in the NFL. You know, you think of a Mike Williams, for example, right? Yeah. Who literally would have broken every single record twofold had he stayed another year or two. The guy was so damn good. He left early with the Maurice Clarett situation, had to sit out an entire year and still went 10. But, you know, his NFL career didn't follow the same trajectory his college career did. But by God, man, that's just another guy. And I think he's well appreciated amongst USC faithful, but what he did at that point in time in college, I mean, it's just, there's no really comparisons.
No, he might be the most dominant wide receiver I've ever seen at USC. That includes Keyshawn, it includes Robert Woods, it includes all these guys we've seen. USC's had a lot of great receivers over the last 25 years. I'm not sure I've seen anybody dominate the way he did. I'm not sure I've seen a wide receiver physically dominate a football game the way Mike Williams could.
I remember coming up from Fresno, California, we had it was a DB. I'm losing his name right now, but he was a big time. He played for the Bears for like 9 years. He was a big NFL talent, but two-sport athlete, baseball, basketball, Ricky something. And I mean, Mike was so big, my man. Like you see him today, you know, he coaches out in Florida. He looks like he could be like bigger than a Russian. I mean, he's just a huge man. And he was like skinny. He was a skinny kid back then. But he would stiff arm guys to the ground with absolute ease. His catch radius was like that of a 7-footer. I mean, that one play he had against Oregon State, he literally caught the back half of a ball with his left hand,
and didn't pull it back.
No, he just kept it right there.
He just left it there.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it's stuff that's like not even human. And you know, talk about having a good target. Not only was he huge, you know, he wasn't the fastest guy, but you couldn't cover him. He would block you out with his body, and he couldn't be brought down too. Again, one of those sleeper guys at the end of the day when you look at the NFL trajectory, but in college, probably no one better.
All right, you mentioned his name already, and he's obviously a famous player, still well known. Has a top 5 resume all time for college quarterbacks. Okay, we're talking about Matt Leinart, of course.
Sure thing.
USC fans that didn't watch a lot of Leinart probably don't realize, because if you watch the highlights, he didn't have Caleb Williams' physicality. He couldn't run like Caleb. He didn't have an arm like Caleb. What was it that made Matt Leinart great?
But I've played with several different quarterbacks, right? And just the thing I think about Matt, he just never got rattled. I mean, it is undeniable, cool and calm. When people see the play clock ticking down and there's signals coming in from the coach, I mean, everybody else in that huddle could be nervous, like, dude, what's going on? How are we going to do it? You can't hear anything. The guy just never expressed any level of anxiety to anybody. And so that's just one thing on a personality trait where, dude, you always knew you had a shot. It was just like 4th and 9 at Notre Dame, right? With Dwayne Jarrett. Who would have thought that we're dead in the water? Not to him, threw a strike. I mean, the guy was just unwavering and he couldn't be rattled. That was just his DNA makeup in that regard is something that really sets him apart from other people that do have better feet, that had a stronger arm, right? They could fit balls into tighter windows. Matt was a consummate field general. He knew what your assignment was better than you probably would. He'd be correcting people. Hey, dude, no, it's this motion. You got to line up over here. And so even like the offensive line, there's a lot of moving parts. He made the game slow down for him because he wasn't the fastest and the quickest release and that kind of stuff. He knew where the ball was supposed to go before it needed to get there. And the one thing that probably caught up with him, obviously at the next level, everybody's running faster. They're bigger. There's tougher pressures. When you're playing with the best offensive line in America, you never get touched. Every receiver has, 2 yards of separation. Your running game is ridiculous. I mean, it's easier to get away with that. And he was obviously almost perfect in a lot of games, right? Because he had those tools. So I can understand how people could look at him and say, hey, he's not the best quarterback or wasn't this or that. But for his time and place at USC, to execute the way that he did with the consistency that he did. And here's another underrated thing about Matt. That's a tough son of a bitch right there, dude. I mean, that guy, he may look like he's a bit of a scarecrow or a beanstalk, right? He works out a lot now. He's looking great, but he's not a thickly built, lower haunches type of quarterback. But, he got chin checked out at Arizona. People forget that. He was knocked the hell out of the game, concussed in the first quarter. And we were getting our asses handed to us. We're down 21-3 at half. He rallied back. He came back into the game that third quarter. Lindell went off. Reggie, I had a nice little 4th down, conversion pass for a touchdown. We battled through. It was 103 degrees. The guy's chin was literally glued back together, dripping blood, and he, eyes were dilated. He came in there and he won the day. So when I think Matt Leinart, dude, not only is he an amazing person, he's kicking tail on TV right now. He's so sharp. You can see the way he breaks down games. Yeah. He knows the inner workings of offensive systems and what defenses are going to do before they do it. That's what made him really special. And it's fun to see him be able to take that part of his life and translate it to what he's doing now because he's so damn good at it. And he commanded a lot of respect from everybody just because of the fact that he was always able, and when everybody thought we were down and out, he did the one thing that needed to happen to get our asses back in gear and rally the troops again.
All right, so I've got another name, same time period, but I'm gonna give you a little bit of a lead in because this is going to get us to a topic we're going to talk about soon. Right now, there are a lot of USC fans that are grumbling a little bit about one of Lincoln Riley's decisions when it came to his coordinator, defensive coordinator in this case.
Yeah,
we'll talk about Alex Grinch in a bit. But you were around when USC fans were grumbling about a coordinator decision that Pete Carroll made, choosing to go with the young kids instead of Norm Chow. So I got a 2-part question for you. One is, tell me what made Norm special. And then 2, tell me what the view was in the locker room when Norm disappeared. And then you have these 2 20-something-year-old kids who are, I think they were 20.
Yeah, they were
taking over.
Wet behind the ears, to be sure. They acted like it too.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Tell me what's special about Norm, and then tell me what you guys internally thought about that move.
You know what? I got to be honest with you. When I was growing up, obviously I was really good at football, made my family proud. It was an avenue to go to greener pastures and get a full ride scholarship and all that. But I wasn't an avid consumer I didn't grow up, you know, we all love Bo Jackson and this and that, but I didn't really know who Norm Chow was, but I could tell right away when he got brought onto the staff, there was like a really unique mystique about this guy, or an allure, or an aura, that this guy was some magic wizard who just was a cut above the rest. And I'll tell you what, man, I just watching his process. I mean, even the way his handwriting was just immaculately perfect when you get on the whiteboard. I mean, the guy had another gear when it came to processing and creativity. You know, you think in the NFL, you think of guys like Andy Reid that are just dynamic and always, back in the woodshed trying to draw up something new and it's never been done before. That was a Norm Chow kind of guy. And I'll just say, stylistically, it was like oil and water with Pete and Norm. Okay. Pete is an extrovert, boisterous, rah-rah, energized, loud, etc. Norm was kind of the guy who was just back behind, the curtain and in the dark, just making things work. And I think that there was a little bit of a tug of war or give and take with credit. I think Norm, our team was humming along. I can't even remember the stats here, but we were putting up damn near 200 yards rushing a game between Thunder and Lightning. Our defense was number one in every fucking category you could think of, right? Scoring defense, turnovers, interceptions, you name it. And I think that at some point, Norm was like, Pete's the one who's getting all the attention for all this kind of stuff. What about me? What about me? And so there was I'm sure there was some closed door blowups. I heard of several of those. There was, a time when all of us in the locker room laughed about this. I think, Lane Kiffin, being, the young buck in the room who got a little too big for his britches, maybe had said something or popped off at Norm, and Norm literally like grabbed him by the ear like an old grandma, like, sit down, young man, like one of those weird things. So, it was kind of a battle of, it's a two-headed monster. We got offense is number one, defense is number one. And it's kind of like, I feel like I'm a little left out, a little jaded. I don't know if that's the truth. That's what we all perceived. And at some point, it was a matter of ego and saying, all right, well, if that's where you're going to be, then you're out. And so to Pete's point, Pete probably knew what was best for him and his coaching staff. Internally, the public on, from an objective layman's view might look at that as a hasty move, or, swallow your pride and deal with it. This guy's, a 1% type of dude. But, let's face it, at the end of the day, Kiffin has done a pretty remarkable job. I mean, when it comes to being a leader of men, we can say what we want about Sarkisian and Kiffin. We've seen them both have some pretty crazy ass moments with sound bites and things that have gotten them into hot water, losing their tempers, making some bad decisions. But when it comes to doing what they do, especially for Kiffin, I mean, that guy, when it comes to being an offensive coordinator, he knows his shit, man. I mean, he's legit. So I think that the biggest issue with Kiffin and that whole wave coming in, and that falls into Hayden's lap too, is making him the head coach when things were going a certain way, and was he ready for that? That's where people have a little bit of a acrid, bitter taste in their mouth. But from a player perspective, I didn't see a ton of drop off. Everybody wants to point to that last play at the Rose Bowl game against Texas is like, what a dumb move. But I mean, we kept on humming along pretty damn well there. And I think from a perspective of Lane kind of being up and coming, his grandfather coming on, or his dad, is pretty old, but doing the Tampa 2 defense and being recruiting, he was probably better suited to fit in with our paradigm and our way of doing things than Norm was, which probably kind of met at heads at some point, unraveled.
So you mentioned whether he was ready for it or not. I think we can safely say right now that Sark and Kiffin both got jobs that they were not ready for back 20 years ago, whatever it was. Now, they both landed on their feet, right? I mean, they both have pretty good jobs right now, and appear to be doing a pretty good job. We'll see.
Yeah, to be determined. Yeah.
But it certainly appeared from an outsider's perspective that Pete was gambling his program on two guys who probably didn't have the experience, seasoning, or maturity to handle the positions they were thrust into. And that was true not only at USC, because you're right, the offensive numbers went up in 2005. They did, all across the board. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that Texas play in a bit. But I think even more so when these guys, when Kiffin gets the head job, when Sarkisian gets a head job, they look to me like guys who were not mature enough to handle those positions and probably could have used another 10-year seasoning.
I agree. I think everybody would agree. And again, the old adage too, getting the keys to the Ferrari before you got your license type of deal. It felt like that a little bit. I don't know the inner workings in politics of how things go, but there may have been some pressure from Monty to come back to do some defensive stuff if he came along later. I think Pete always tends to see the best in people. He wants to understand what their capabilities are and what their propensity to reach those capabilities will be. And there was a lot of special sparks in both of those guys. They've been able to do things, but you're right. The key word is maturity here. And when you're thinking, I mean, when I was 18, my roommate, Sonny Bird, who's a legend in his own right, Manhattan Beach, he was like the last, white tailback to start a game, and people just love the guy. I think he was like 25. He was like a junior transferred, super senior, if you will. And I think he might have been older than Kiffin. So I think Pete might have shot himself in the foot a little bit because some of the guys just didn't respect him as an authority figure. He's like, he's like a frat boy, right? I mean, Mike Williams, we were just talking about him earlier, being 6'6" and an imposing guy. And for the entirety of his career, he never called him Coach Kiffin. He called him not even Lane. He called him Lance, just like to bastardize. Whatever, Lance. I ran that. I'll see you Saturday. I'm not practicing. Leave me alone. Bye-bye. Buzz off. Lance, not even Lane or Coach Kiff. So, that should have been a little bit of a red flag. And people can have their responses about that too. But, Pete, I got to say this because as much as he was a holistic, leader of the program to the public eye, he really didn't have a lot. I never saw him drop into our offensive meeting rooms. He wasn't coming down to our side of the sideline very often to talk about what we could do on this next drive. He was defense. He was immersed in that. And he had his warlords, the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator really pulling the weight there. So there must have been something that he really saw in Kiffin that made him feel comfortable with that to be able to kind of, run the ringleader position of that side of the ball.
All right, so I want to talk about one more issue from the good old days, and then we're going to transition to Lincoln's program. I want to talk about that Texas game, and I actually don't want to focus on the fourth down play as much. I had Pat Rule on here a few months ago, and I bet we spent 30 minutes breaking down that play. Yeah. I think in some ways the key play was 2nd and 7 of that drive, and you were a part of that, obviously. USC. The Trojans get the ball back. For those who don't know, and if you don't know, then you're probably fortunate not to know because for the rest,
let's keep it that way. Ignorance is bliss.
That's right. USC gets the ball back with a 5-point lead. They get the ball back with 4 minutes left. It's 4-minute offense. You run out the clock. You get a number of first downs. You go home. You get 3 straight national titles. Yeah. Lindell had run the ball on that second half extremely well. But coming in, but when you get to 2nd and 7 at the 50-yard line, he'd had 2 straight 3-yard carries. Texas has a bunch of guys in the box, right?
Everybody. Yeah.
And so USC not unwisely says, we run play action, we toss it out to Hancock in the flats, we probably pick up a first down here. And that's the play call. Tell me what happens from your perspective.
Yeah, you know what, I hate to say it. I mean, I've never gone back and watched the tape in its entirety. It just brings up a lot of bad demons. I think a lot of guys have that sort of response too. I mean, look, we've done documentaries about it. The 30 for 30 was all about that. There's been numerous things to appear and to talk about that play in particular. Whatever people want to say, look, they had, I think, a corner cat. It was set up perfectly for the design. Matt had to get rid of the ball quick. There was a lot of pressure coming at him. The way that I remember it is if, I was expecting the ball as I did, and I had to get my head around quick because there was a blitz on. If that ball would have landed over my left shoulder, if I could have secured it, turned up field, dude, I would have been a first down, game's over. That's it. We moved the chains, run the clock out, signed, sealed, delivered. And you can correct me if I'm wrong because you probably broke it down a lot more than I did. I remember the ball being underthrown quite a bit behind me. And if I had, even if I were able to turn and catch it, I would have to give my feet out to basically catch it for maybe a yard or two gain. There wasn't any way I could have actually rotated, got that pass, and then kept my momentum running forward without the defender coming to take me out.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I have looked at the play. In fact, I looked at it again before we got on, and And yeah, they got to Matt much more quickly than he would have wanted, and he just tanked the pass. It was low behind you, not catchable. Here's the thing, though. You can say what you want. He threw a bad pass. Matt Leinart was 14 of 15 for about 190 yards in the second half before that play, right?
I know.
He was lighting it up. But then you have 3rd and 7.
Yeah.
Then they give the ball back to Lindell on an off tackle play. He picks up.
Everybody knows what's coming, dude. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing. I mean, we got to remember that Brian Arakpo on that defensive line, that Michael Huff, first rounder, safety. They loaded 9-10 people in that box, and there was no exterior. You take it from here, buddy. But that's what's so frustrating, because they knew the formula at that point. There was no disguising it, and they were able to stalwart us.
Here's the thing. Here's my perspective, and I told Pat Rule this when we talked about it. I had no problem with the 2nd down play call. I had no problem with the 3rd down play call. Lindell picks up 5. He actually picked up 6, but he fumbles the ball, and Steve Smith catches it and loses a yard on that.
Yeah.
My problem is on 4th down and 2, Texas had 10 guys in the box. And if you look at it, their safety is 4 yards off the line of scrimmage. I mean, they have everybody in the box. That was the time to run the play action pass. And I think the only reason they didn't do it is because they tried it on 2nd down and it failed, and they didn't have the guts to pull the trigger. Pat didn't tell me that was the reason. I'm not sure he knows the reason, but my impression was that was the time. I think Kirtland was in on that play. You toss it to Kirtland in the flats, he will walk 40 yards for a touchdown.
You're right, dude. Listen, I'm right with you in the same vein on that. It takes some gusto there. I mean, there's a lot of conflict with people saying, well, hey, why wasn't Reggie even on the field as a decoy? If he would have motioned out, they would have at least pulled the defender to cloud him. It was just like, we're coming here. You're not going to stop us. I think it was Winston Justice. Anyway, someone slipped on their block. It was over. But right, if you had the wherewithal, the courage to do another, like a power where you slip out, juke the defensive end, that thing would have gone to the goalpost. Smashed your head.
Yep.
And you're right, because we did it the 2nd down when I was in. And if that ball would have gotten there, I mean, I think it's a curtain call. But that's just one of those infamous plays that live in the darkness of lore with our fan base. That whole series of what coulda, shoulda, woulda, it gets us every time, because no one's ever done the 3-peat thing. I hope it doesn't happen this year with Georgia. But damn it, we were literally inches away from making that thing go.
Yeah, and look, we should give credit where credit is due. That was an unbelievable Texas team, and I've seen people rank that as the greatest college football game of all time, and I think there's some merit to it. The talent level on the field, and while the first half of play was a little bit sloppy, Reggie throwing the ball on the carpet for no good reason, weird things. The second half, offensively, both teams performed at such an unbelievable level. I mean, unstoppable, really. So. One of the greatest games of all time, and we saw 2 of them that year, right? We saw,
sure did,
right?
Man.
One of them went the right way, one of them went the wrong way. Okay, so let me ask you. I want to talk about Lincoln Riley's program now, and I want to start with this: can Lincoln Riley build a defense that puts USC where it wants to be, or is USC forever stuck as I say stuck? We're a whole lot better off than we were 5 years ago, but. Is USC an 11-2 program that will not beat the Georgias, will not beat the Alabamas, because we're unbelievable on one side of the ball and just not very good on the other side?
It's difficult to assess. And this kind of goes back to our argument before where, you had who's the king and who's the queen, or, the prince and the princess, right? So, defense, all the teams that I played for, as much as you want to say, I mean, we had electrifying offensive production. I mean, yards per game. I mean, the pizzazz, the spark with the passing game, all, Reggie's, hijinks, all the crazy stuff he pulled. Those teams were always rooted in defense. I mean, you look at what happened at the Orange Bowl against Oklahoma, Adrian Peterson, Jason White, Heisman winner. Dude, we stomped a mud hole in their ass. Dude, that guy had like maybe 40 yards rushing. And within the first, 2 series, we're like, we own these dudes. And so I think for us to not just get to the dance, which, last year, look what happened. I mean, God dang, at that Utah performance, that stuff really just tears your heart out as a Trojan. A lot of the guys that I obviously played with, but even going back to in the 80s and 70s and stuff, we were a program that was instilled fear on the defensive side of the ball. And I think with Lincoln Riley, like, he is so good at what he does. Again, this is a master class. He is a cut above. I mean, for his age, I mean, the way he just comports himself, he's not like Pete. He's actually the antithesis of Pete in a lot of ways. He doesn't want people running into his practice and having a lot of hoopla around the program. He's very inculcated in it, or inoculated in his own little bubble. He doesn't really like to be out on the road and speaking in front of crowds. Pete, loved it. He was on the circuit nonstop. He loved it, ate it up. But I think in order for USC to take the next step, to be able to go toe to toe and smash it out with some of the big dogs down in the SEC, we're not ready, and we don't have the physicality on the defensive side yet. Now, I know, we got some transfers. This whole thing we'll probably talk about in a minute with, the transfer portal, how it's rebalance the landscape of football, and that, now, people aren't necessarily recruiting out of high school. They're just getting, players already that are tried and true that could go anywhere they want every single year. We're in a whole new ballgame in an arena now, but you can see it. You can get guys to come in that, like this guy from Georgia, Bear, I believe is his name, right? Who won a national championship last year. That adds an element to shore up the front seven, to add some physicality, to change the mentality of the way things were done from last year. You get enough pieces like that, you can have a revolution. You can change things up a little bit. I think the old school way of doing things is recruit, someone sits behind the starter who's, a first round draft pick or an All-American. That person comes up, they're going to be good. It's, not draft, but recruit, develop, and let them play. Now I think it's got to be faster. It's got to be immediate. We have holes to fill. You got to go out into the market, grab them, plug them in there, and then have the ability to make all these, independent parts coalesce together and play in a unified fashion. So, we saw with Deion Sanders, people were blown away by, he overhauled 50 people on a roster. These guys never played together. They came out and they were crisp as all hell. Like, that's hard to do. Now, is he worried he's not a national contender yet? I totally get that. But the way college football is now, I don't think there's any reason why Lincoln can't do that. If Grinch is having a hard time with some schematic stuff and adjustments in the second half and a level of physicality, maybe we got to look for a different answer there. I'm not in the the team meeting rooms, and I don't, to be honest with you, I don't pay close enough attention to that side of the ball to really pick it apart. But it's all about chemistry. It's all about having the right pieces that fit to make things function on the right level, and then having the cornerstone leaders on the team. If you have one guy in the defensive secondary, one linebacker, and one lineman that can basically, be the field general for everybody else in that unit. I mean, we had those in all of our teams that we had, from the Taylor Mays to, I listed a million linebackers for you already, the Cushings of the world, to the guys like Sean Cody. And there's so many All-Americans. That's usually how I've seen the best success with defensive personnel, and having them actually drop it, dominate. But again, you have to have the right game plan too. Today's game is so different. You have to be able to make adjustments. And one thing that we were always considered a second half team. It's like a boxing match. You come out, you got to throw your jab, you got to feel people out, and you got to read and say what's working, what's not. You feel out your opponent. But every time we came out of the tunnel at halftime, it was usually like, sayonara, MFer, we're out of here. And that's the marking of a coaching staff that knows what the hell they're doing and how to pull the right strings to make the marionette dance the way it needs to go. So, I'm never going to be a pessimist and an egghead on this. I think Lincoln Riley is an astute enough individual, super smart, young coach, but that's not his wheelhouse. If you can't figure it out, find the right person that can, because we know damn well, after last year's season, this year we should finish better. If we don't, it's a failure. But people are wanting to come back to LA now, especially with the opportunity to make money in this city. Look, you can do a boat dealership advertisement and make $100,000 or something, in Tuscaloosa, or you can be in a movie out here in the summer, with a speaking role. It's just it's an apples to oranges type of deal. We should be able to get the best talent coming off these seasons we have. We need to have the right people in line to make sure they operate at their fullest capacity.
Yeah, so it's interesting because with the transfer portal and NIL, it's possible to build a program much more quickly than ever before. But it also is probably harder to hold on to guys, right? Some of those teams you played on, you get a 5-star kid who's third on the depth chart, and it's clear that he's going to be a second team guy the next year. it may be hard to hold on to those guys in this college football. And the other thing about this season is Lincoln Riley's always going to have good offenses. We shouldn't pretend that when Caleb Williams leaves that USC won't be able to score points. Lincoln Riley always scores points. That being said, you may never again have another Caleb Williams. And so what Lincoln has done this offseason is he has gambled a really unusual situation where you have a guy who's going to be one of the great college quarterbacks of all time and will be almost certainly a Pro Bowler in the NFL. He's that talented.
No question.
You know that all you need to do is play solid defense.
Yeah.
And right now we're still wondering whether USC is going to be able to play solid defense. That's kind of a strange position to be in if you're USC.
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, it's a battle of attrition. Every season always is. You know, last year, hey, he not had that terrible hamstring pull. You know, he's a different guy, right? He's playing with half the field. He can't throw across his body. The escapability was done. He became a very one-dimensional player. Had that not happened, who knows, right? Things could have been different. We are so good on offense with the team that he's assembled and the playmaking ability. And again, Caleb is a once-in-a-generation type of player. I firmly believe that. This guy is extra special. You know, I talked to Mark Sanchez, who's a dear friend of mine, lives right down the street. We hang a lot. Wasn't sold on him at first. You know, he's like, oh, you know, it doesn't look the part, you know, different kind of build. I'm not sure if I see it yet. And sure as shit, man, this guy's come in here and proven to everybody. He's like the new version of what it means to be a quarterback, I feel like. Not the tallest guy, right? He could benefit from some of that, but rocket arm, amazing decision-making, accuracy on the move, thick. I mean, the guy's just special. So listen, if we get in shootouts, who am I going to bet on? I'm going to take our odds more often than not. But, you know, there's so much riding on. Again, it's always this way for quarterbacks, but it'd be nice once in a while to not have to win games 45-46, or whoever has the ball last is going to win. You're playing with fire that way. It makes life a lot easier when your defense could come out there, stone people, put them down in the third quarter where it's not a contest, let the backups get in and play a little bit, which, you know, we've seen a little bit more this year. But the good programs, man, I mean, they're going to rumble back. They're going to run, you know, they're going to put our defense through the paces as they probably did before. You know, the Pac-12, it's doing great this year. God bless it. You know, ironically, it's going to be blown up and we came out of the gates humming. But we haven't seen that kind of competition yet with powerful run games and big dogs up front that are going to move you around like bears on ice skates type of thing. So, you know, we got to just hang true to what we're doing. I think, you know, if things click the right way and people stay healthy, you know, I'll put my money on Lincoln Riley and his game plan offensively versus another coach, and I'll put our talent on that side. But it does leave a lot of room open for there to be some upsets. And that's the scariest part. Can we pull it all together? And again, it's a marathon here, and make sure that we get it to the promised land, because we're going to be challenged a lot tougher here in the future.
Yeah. All right. Before we cut out of here, because we're getting close to an hour, and after an hour, nobody wants to listen to me anymore. So here's, I want to talk about what you're doing these days. And by the way, I searched on the internet just to see what I could find on you. You have the best IMDb page of all time. Do you know what it says?
I haven't even seen it. What's it say?
So it says you're known for two things: for an episode of Scrubs, and for the 2004 Rose Bowl in which you played yourself. I have no idea.
I got to get a screenshot of that. I'm going to put that on my business card.
Yeah, go look at it. Go look at it. It's great. And by the way, that was, of the two Rose Bowls you played in, that was the one I enjoyed the most. All right. So what are you up to these days, Brandon?
You know what, man, I've been really blessed. And, you know, all this talk about Pete Carroll, and he's such, you know, I'm a disciple of his. I've been a proponent. Life is about competition and finding opportunities to excel. And you got to be creative some way. So I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of success. Obviously, I was a broadcaster for close to a decade. Got tired of the road show, got into wealth management. I still have a book of business with friends and family that I cater to. I've sold real estate, kind of a jack of all trades, but my latest passion and what I got headhunted to come do, I'm the director of all sales domestically for a company called Solvo Global. And, you know, my father was an attorney for 35 plus years. And so I've been around professional organizations and see the headaches that they have, especially here in the state of California with labor laws, hiring talent, retaining talent. It kind of goes into our conversation, right? Getting the right pieces to fit or having to let them go. It's very expensive to do business here. not just here, but just everywhere in the country. So my company specializes in remote staffing solutions for everything under the sun, from medical to healthcare, insurance, legal. We provide CPAs, paralegals, front office, back office support with people that are educated, humble, hungry, and extra talented. Your traditional outsourcing partners in the Philippines and India, flip time zone, non-English neutral language. It's a tougher product to work with. We source all of our talent from Central and South America. We're in 9 countries down there now. And again, it's about 1/3 of the cost of what people pay here in the United States. For example, just an executive assistant, you're paying $10, $11 an hour for someone who's graduated with a 4-year bachelor's degree, year of work experience. And we're the employer of record. So all the taxes, insurance, headache, benefits, we take care of all that stuff. And it also protects a lot of employers from liability these days. You say the wrong trigger word with someone in your office, you can get drug into litigation. You hire a dud, you're stuck with them, you let them go, they're going to sue you for wrongful termination. So we're just a really customizable, flexible opportunity for business owners to staff their companies, to either scale up and provide support for their top performers, or to trim the fat and run lean and mean. So that's kind of the nature of the beast, man. I'm in South America a lot. I'm at trade shows a lot. And I get to hang with really sharp people, mainly attorneys like yourself.
You have every opportunity available to you, and you choose to spend a bunch of time with lawyers. That shows bad judgment, Brandon. I mean, I don't have a choice but to spend time with lawyers. You do. Hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on. It was fun talking to you, and I know all the fans out there are going to be thrilled to hear what you have to say. Thank you, sir.
Okay, absolute pleasure. I miss all you guys. I look forward to coming to some games. We'll be at homecoming this year. While we're at it, I'm not sure if this is airing today. I'm going to do a little showing tomorrow, an appearance down here in Orange County at the Tustin Brewing Company. We're going to do a little post-game wrap and chat after we smash Dion and humble that guy, knock him down another peg.
Hey, don't be so quick to. You heard their athletic director has asked their fans not to rush the field. Did you hear this?
Are you kidding me?
I just saw on the news today the Colorado athletic director asking them not to storm the field. I hope they don't.
They might as well just let that big buffalo loose and just let them go spear the hell out of people like Pamplona in Spain or something. Let those guys have it. But it's been a real pleasure. And again, fight on to the Trojan family. It's an honor to go to the school. It's not a 4-year commitment like they say. It's a forever commitment. And my comings and goings, if I ever bump into you, don't ever hesitate to come up and say hi, and we'll talk some shop and share some stories, guys.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.